So, before we begin with this theme, if you haven't yet watched my first video about the Kommunalkas, I recommend that you watch it now. Here I want to tell you about all the later individual housing styles. So, as the Soviet Union became older and older, there was finally enough money to supply the whole country with new buildings. So, in the middle of 1930s, the construction of so-called Stalinkas began. These were mostly houses for high-ranking officials and famous people like scientists or writers. The architects have created an entirely new monumental style, the Stalin's Empire, to match the needs of the government. As these houses were extremely luxurious, at least for the USSR, the amounts of them were limited. They were mostly located in large cities. As an example, there are the famous 7 Stalin skyscrapers in Moscow, which perfectly represent this style. Mostly, the apartments had 3 to 4 rooms or even more, unlimited water supplies, and sometimes even glass doors between rooms. After Stalin's death, in a short period of 2 years, the country was governed by Georgy Malenkov. He was the first leader of the USSR to implement the idea of mass apartment buildings, and in these 2 years, the experimental Malenkovkas were built. They only exist in a few districts in Moscow, but were an important step on the way to the simplification of Soviet apartment buildings. They were made of what is called large blocks. These were not the regular blocks you know, but still bigger than single bricks. The large blocks never really became famous, which is very sad in my opinion. Now we finally got to the phase you all waited for, the Khrushchevkas. This was the first time the buildings truly went to the masses. In November 1955, the Politburo accepted the resolution on the elimination of excesses in architecture. That meant no more columns, no more balustrades, and no more fancy spires on top of buildings. And the most important material was now the full-size concrete panels. Also, a new system began working. If an architect constructed one building, he at the same time constructed hundreds or thousands of them. All the new 5-story houses were now the same all over the Soviet country. Why 5-story? The answer is simple. It was the maximum number of floors in a building where you didn't have to, by the standards of that time, mount a lift. The apartments were extremely small, ceilings low, and there was even a version that the minimum sizes of staircases were measured by whether you could carry a coffin down the stairs or not. Khrushchevkas were built for a rather short period of time, from early 60s to about 1967, but were never forgotten. If you ask me, I also grew up in a Khrushchevka. The era of blossoming of panel housing began with the rule of Brezhnev. Now there appeared a lot of different types of buildings. They got higher, up to 16 floors, and better built. Though the problems with sound isolation remained, you could still hear your neighbor's screams. There are so many types of Brezhnevkas that they're nearly impossible to remember, but here are the most popular ones. 268, also called Makarevich, here was located one of the first apartments I lived in. 218/9, another one of my first homes. 1515/9 Shah, also nicknamed Fortress because of its length. 1335, but there are also many other 5-story Brezhnevka types, and Kopé. It was constructed later, beginning from 1981, and contains more floors as a result. Fun fact, if there were panels left over from a house, you could build a smaller house out of them. So appeared these ridiculous but cute houses in small towns and villages. Anyways, the era of Brezhnevkas continued during Gorbachev's rule, but not on the same scale. The Brezhnevkas remained the most common sort of buildings throughout the entire former Soviet Union. Now, I could tell you about the post-Soviet building styles, but I am no specialist in them, to be honest. So here I end my video and I hope you enjoyed. Goodbye comrades, and see you in the next one.